Welcome to the debate. Astrophysicists often talk about this concept of, gravitational wells, where the larger and more massive a celestial body is, well, the stronger its pull.
Right. It just drags everything into its orbit.
Exactly. It attracts objects from across the solar system with this incredible, almost inevitable ease. But that exact same gravitational force makes it nearly impossible for anything to ever leave. I mean, you need an extraordinary amount of escape velocity to break free. And today we are analyzing the footballing equivalent of a supermassive gravitational well, the current transfer market ecosystem at Real Madrid.
Yeah, it's a really stark economic contrast defining the club right now, because you're looking at an institution that has practically perfected the art of attraction, but they seem to have entirely lost the mechanism for expulsion.
Right, so to frame the central question emerging from our material today, on one hand, we're looking at a club that has generated a staggering 200 million euros this summer alone, just by selling youth academy players, the Canteranos.
Which is huge.
It is. The academy is this economic engine operating at absolute peak efficiency. Yet, simultaneously, there's this near total paralysis when it comes to selling established first-team players.
Complete gridlock.
So the question is, when high-earning veterans no longer fit the sporting project, should an elite institution maintain absolute passive respect for their contracts and comfort, or, should it actively apply what we might call uncomfortable sporting pressure to incentivize their departure? I will argue that absolute adherence to contract sanctity and player comfort is a fundamental pillar of the club's long-term institutional appeal. It's a structural stability they can't lose.
And I will argue that passive roster management, just letting players sit, leads directly to sporting stagnation, making ethical but, firm internal pressure an absolute competitive necessity if you want to evolve the squad.
Okay, so to begin, I want to establish why the current approach is not the crisis some people perceive it to be. It's actually a foundational strength of the institution.
A strength? I mean, not being able to sell players is a strength?
Hear me out. Treating contracts as sacred and refusing to systematically marginalize players. That is the very bedrock of Real Madrid's long-term appeal to the global elite. When you look at that 200 million generated by the Youth Academy through the sales of Nico Paz, Alex Jimenez, Palacios, Alvaro Rodriguez, Gonzalo Garcia.
Sure, the youth sales are fantastic.
Right. But what that shows is a club whose financial health is demonstrably robust. They do not need to force out first-team players just to keep the lights on. And more importantly, this financial security allows the club to maintain a real moral high ground in the transfer market.
Moral high ground doesn't necessarily win trophies, though.
But it wins the transfer market. We have all seen the chaotic, often hostile, strong-arm tactics utilized by rivals, Paris Saint-Germain or Barcelona. We've seen players banished from training facilities or publicly pressured to defer wages.
Yeah, that's true. It gets ugly.
Exactly. By actively avoiding those methods, Real Madrid ensures it remains the ultimate undisputed destination for global talent. When an elite player signs that contract, they know they'll be treated with absolute institutional dignity for the duration of that agreement, even if managerial tactics shift. That guarantee of security is exactly what attracts the best players in the world. Absolute adherence to contract sanctity it's not a bug in the system. It's the ultimate feature of a winning culture.
Okay, I hear that. And the 200 million generated by the Youth Academy is an incredible accounting achievement. I won't dispute that at all. But we have to look deeper here, because that massive figure is effectively masking a critical, systemic failure in first-team squad management.
Masking it how? The money is real.
The money is real, but the reality of the first team is grim. The club has not engineered a major first-team sale since Casemiro in 2022 and Rafael Varane in 2021, and it is crucial to note, both of those players had to initiate their own exits.
Well, they realized their cycles were ending.
Right. They recognized it and brought the offers to the boardroom themselves. The club itself has lost the capacity to proactively move players. When an institution lacks a functional mechanism to transition away from players who no longer fit the manager's tactical system, and I mean, look at the lingering situations surrounding high-profile contracts like Camavinga or Asensio.
Well, those are complex situations.
They are, but you lose the ability to shake the tree, so to speak. You cannot finance new necessary arrivals if your capital is tied up in players sitting on the bench. We're currently looking at a 2-year failure to meet primary sporting objectives, and this passive roster management is a direct contributor to that stagnation.
So you're saying loyalty is a liability?
The loyalty you champion is mathematically guaranteed to become a prison for aging players. Ethical but firm internal sporting pressure isn't just an option for a modern club. It is an absolute competitive necessity if you want to prevent the squad from rotting from the inside out.
Rotting. I mean, your assertion that the squad is rotting implies that the inability to sell first-team players is a failure of execution. I maintain that it is simply the natural cost of doing business at the absolute pinnacle of the sport.
Because of the wages.
Yes, exactly. To understand this, we have to look at the underlying mechanics of why these academy players move so easily while the veterans do not.
Right, it is entirely about the wage architecture. The club has built a wage trap.
But it's a trap of their own successful design. Think of it this way. Building this squad is like outfitting the lobby of a luxury hotel with custom-cut imported Italian marble.
Okay, Italian marble?
Right. It is breathtaking, it defines your prestige, and it serves its purpose perfectly. But years later, when you want to renovate, you cannot act surprised or complain that a 2-star roadside motel won't buy your used marble. The transportation and installation costs alone would exceed their entire operating budget.
Right, the overhead is just too high for anyone else.
Exactly. Elite players are illiquid assets by design. The massive contracts are the very mechanism that secured these elite players in the first place. You cannot have the prestige and the security of signing the world's best without accepting that their secondary market will be infinitesimally small.
The Italian marble metaphor is visually striking, I'll give you that, but it ignores the immediate financial reality on the ground. Because it's not just about the ultra-elite, it is about the middle class of the squad, too. Let's break down the mechanics of the academy sales you mentioned, because it proves my point about the wage trap perfectly.
Go ahead.
Take Gonzalo Garcia. Why did he move to Fulham for 40 million euros for 70% of his rights? If you're looking at this and wondering how a mid-tier Premier League club affords that massive fee for a developing player, it all comes down to amortization and base salary.
Exactly. The accounting mechanisms favor youth. We agree on that.
But we need to explain how they favor youth. When Fulham pays 40 million, they don't take a massive one-time hit on their books. They spread that 40 million cost over a 5-year contract. That is amortization. They can only afford to take that risk on the transfer fee because Gonzalo's base salary is practically a rounding error in a Premier League budget.
Right. It's very manageable.
Exactly. If Gonzalo had been earning, say, 1.5 million net in Madrid, which creeps up to 8 or 10 million gross like a standard first-team rotation player, Fulham never makes that deal. The youth players have accessible wage packets that open a massive universe of potential buyers.
That entirely validates the club's strategy. They utilize the youth academy as a revenue generator. By keeping 30% of the rights, Real Madrid retains the upside if the player develops into a superstar, while Fulham takes the immediate financial risk.
It's a great deal for the academy. Yes.
It's an elegant, highly functional economic loop. The developing club feels a sense of ownership, the player gets crucial first-team minutes in a top league, and the parent club makes a massive capital gain to balance the books. It eliminates the need to push out veterans.
It is an elegant loop for the academy, but it completely collapses when applied to the first team. Take Fran Garcia. He didn't even have an astronomical top-tier superstar contract. He just didn't have a Cantorano contract anymore.
Right, he was on a first-team wait.
Exactly. And when it came time to move him to a mid-tier team like Real Betis, the market mechanics broke down. To get Betis to assume Fran Garcia's wages, Real Madrid had to accept a significantly reduced transfer fee for 50% of his rights. Do you see the mechanism there?
The wages offset the fee.
The high wages act as a literal anchor on the transfer fee. Now scale that up back up to your Italian marble analogy. When you are dealing with players who have undergone multiple contract renewals, who are earning premium globally significant wages, the universe of clubs that can afford the combination of their transfer fee and their wage demands shrinks to maybe 5 or 6 institutions globally.
And my point is that those 5 or 6 institutions are the only ones you should be dealing with anyway. If a player has proven they are good enough to earn a renewed, premium first-team contract at this specific institution, their secondary market should only be the absolute elite of the Champions League.
But what if those elite clubs don't want them?
Then the player remains, and the club honors the contract they willingly offered.
I just reject the premise that simply honoring the contract is a victimless act. What happens when a player simply doesn't fit the tactical evolution of the squad anymore? This has nothing to do with whether they are inherently a bad player. The sport evolves rapidly. Managers are replaced.
That's just football.
Right, tactical systems shift from possession-heavy to transition-based. You might have a player who was absolutely vital 3 years ago, whose premium contract reflects that past value, but who currently contributes almost nothing to the tactical vision on the pitch. We are looking at a situation where players like Asensio or Camavinga have historically found themselves in incredibly complex tactical positions.
Okay, but...
And even putting their personal willingness to leave aside for a moment, their contracts dictate that they can only move to a top-tier Champions League rival. And let's be realistic here. Bayern Munich or Manchester City are not in the business of doing you favors by taking your tactical mismatches off your hands just to help you balance your wage bill.
So, because the market for premium talent is inherently restrictive, your solution is to artificially engineer an environment within the club that forces these players out against their will?
My solution is to prioritize sporting evolution over institutional sentimentality. The source material outlines a very clear, legally and morally sound approach. You make the environment uncomfortable, but strictly within the bounds of sporting merit.
Uncomfortable is a highly sanitized word for what you are proposing. Let's be clear about the psychological impact of that.
Let's be specific about the mechanism then, because I am not talking about illegal isolation. I'm not advocating for the tactics you mentioned earlier, banning players from the training ground, cutting off their access to the medical staff, or leaking defamatory stories to the press. I completely reject all of that.
Okay, so what does uncomfortable mean then?
It means if a highly paid veteran no longer fits the project, the manager must actively prioritize a developing Ken Serrano over them in the matchday rotation. You strip away their minutes. By doing that, you fundamentally change the player's internal calculus.
You are weaponizing playing time.
I am allocating playing time toward the future. Look, if you're listening to this and wondering why a player wouldn't just take a pay cut to get on the pitch somewhere else, you have to understand the precedent it sets for their agent and their own financial security. They will sit on the bench if it's comfortable.
Naturally.
But suddenly, sitting on a massive contract in Madrid isn't so comfortable when they realize they are losing their relevance in the sport. They drop out of their national team picture, their brand value diminishes, they become intrinsically motivated to seek minutes elsewhere, perhaps accepting a lower annual salary on a longer-term contract at a new club to compensate for the financial gap.
Look, I'll grant you that avoiding the illegal, hostile tactics of other clubs is a necessary baseline, but I am entirely unconvinced by your proposed alternative because it fundamentally compromises the competitive integrity of the team.
How so?
You are suggesting that a manager should make tactical and rotational decisions based on spreadsheet balancing rather than pure sporting merit.
I am suggesting the manager makes decisions based on long-term tactical fit.
But on a Sunday evening, when you are tied 1-1 in a crucial league match, long-term fit doesn't matter. Winning matters. If you deliberately limit a first-team player's minutes, a player who, despite not fitting the long-term vision, is objectively better right now than the youth player you are forcing onto the pitch, you are jeopardizing the team's immediate ability to win.
I think you're underestimating the youth players, but...
And football players are incredibly perceptive. The locker room knows immediately when a manager is making a political substitution rather than a tactical one. If the players sense that the instruction has come from the boardroom to bench a veteran purely to create financial leverage for a transfer, you destroy the trust between the squad and the manager. You are allowing financial strategy to dictate on-pitch tactics. That is exactly the kind of institutional rot that eventually destroys winning cultures from the inside.
Okay, but is it a violation of meritocracy if the veteran is genuinely no longer fulfilling the tactical demands of the manager? Look at how Manchester City manages their squad hierarchy. They recently managed to sell a discard for 60 million euros.
That is a very specific situation.
But 60 million euros for a player who did not fit their primary sporting project? That kind of capital return doesn't happen by accident. It happens because there is proactive, ruthless management of the squad's hierarchy. When a player realizes they are genuinely surplus to requirements, and the club makes that practically clear through their playing time, the players' camp activates. They find the exit. They find the solution.
Right. Manchester City's ability to extract 60 million for a surplus player is a remarkable piece of business. But looking at it purely as an accounting victory misses the broader institutional context. When we talk about the gravity of Real Madrid, the great appeal of playing for this specific institution, we are talking about a total package of prestige, wealth, and quality of life.
Which makes them want to stay forever.
Exactly. The material highlights this explicitly. The sheer greatness of the club, the comfort of the environment, the unparalleled quality of life in the city, these are incredibly powerful retention factors. The gravity that pulls the talent in is the exact same gravity that traps it there. If you start artificially punishing players for enjoying the legal, binding contract you willingly offered them, you erode that aura.
Trust is important, sure, but a football club is a highly competitive sporting entity, not a country club. We cannot ignore that they have spent 2 years failing to meet their primary sporting objectives. The management bears a massive responsibility here.
They've had injuries, they've had...
If the squad structure remains untouched after underperforming, if we never touch the core of the team out of sheer affection or a desire to maintain this vague concept of institutional stability, we are actively choosing stagnation. You need capital fluidity to evolve.
Define what you mean by capital fluidity in this context, because we just established the club generated 200 million euros.
The 200 million from the academy is brilliant, but it operates as a parallel economy. It does not solve the core issue of a congested first-team wage bill, which creates a squad registration bottleneck. In La Liga, you have strict roster limits.
Yes, the 25-man squad.
Right. A registration bottleneck isn't just an accounting headache. If you have a veteran player taking up 12% of your salary cap, occupying one of those precious 25 roster spots, but only playing 15% of the available minutes, your capital is highly inefficient. You are literally blocked from registering the profile of player you need to fix a broken midfield. To finance the next generation of elite talent, you need the expensive, underperforming assets off the books.
It is only inefficient if you view these players strictly as financial instruments on a spreadsheet, rather than human beings under legally binding agreements. The institution operates on the principle that contracts are sacred. Yes, there have been sporting disappointments. The situation with Rodri being unavailable or out of reach is a notable setback. But the broader market strategy remains overwhelmingly positive. Look at the departures of players like Carvajal and Alaba, who were simply winding down their contracts.
But that is just waiting for the clock to run out.
It is natural attrition. By honoring those deals to the very last day, by showing immense, unwavering respect to the players who built the club's modern history, you send a beacon to every 18-year-old phenom in the world. You are telling them, if you give us your prime years, we will not discard you like a depreciating asset the moment you lose half a step.
It's romantic, but...
Even against long odds, honoring that desire is the ultimate expression of institutional confidence. It says we are wealthy enough and structurally sound enough that we do not need to bully our own employees to balance the books.
Bullying is an emotionally charged term for what is simply establishing a clear, unambiguous sporting reality. The paradox we are analyzing is precisely that the club's greatest virtues, its loyalty, its immense wealth, its incredible living environment, have become its greatest obstacles to refreshing the squad.
They are heavy virtues.
Very heavy. If an established player refuses to leave because the living conditions are simply too pleasant and the paycheck is too high, despite the manager making it abundantly clear they are not in the tactical plans, that player is making a financial decision, not a sporting one. Therefore, the club must respond with a sporting consequence, the forfeiture of minutes to a hungry academy player.
I just think that's incredibly dangerous for squad harmony.
It is not immoral to develop your own youth at the expense of a veteran who refuses to read the writing on the wall.
The days of simply offering a player to another club and casually agreeing on a fee are over when dealing with elite wages. The player holds all the leverage. If the club does not exert the limited sporting leverage it retains, which is the allocation of playing time, it effectively surrenders total control of its roster to the player's agents.
Well, that brings us back to the sheer complexity of the situation. We are simultaneously operating the most fluid, dynamic, and lucrative academy market in the world, while managing a first-team structure that moves with the speed of continental drift.
And that disparity is fascinating. It really perfectly illustrates the extreme wage polarization in modern football. The bottom end of the market, the high-potential, low-wage academy players, spins rapidly because the financial risk is entirely in the transfer fee, which can be amortized easily. But at the top end, the market is frozen solid by guaranteed immovable money.
It is a testament to the fact that greatness carries its own specific gravity. So to summarize my position in light of our discussion today, I maintain that the absolute respect for contracts and the refusal to apply artificial, hostile sporting pressure is a cornerstone of this institution's elite global status. The incredible financial engine of the academy proves that the club does not need to resort to transactional ruthlessness to survive. Institutional honor preserves the long-term culture of trust that ultimately secures the world's best talent.
And to synthesize my perspective, a football club, no matter how prestigious or historically successful, must prioritize dynamic sporting evolution. When the squad underperforms its objectives, the management must have functional mechanisms to refresh the roster. Applying legal, moral, but firm sporting pressure, specifically by prioritizing the development of youth over comfortable veterans, is not an abandonment of values. It's the necessary application of competitive standards. You have to shake the tree if you want to catch the fruit.
We find ourselves looking at a situation where the very elements that make a club universally attractive, unprecedented wealth, immense prestige, and unparalleled comfort, paradoxically become the heaviest chains when trying to move forward. The gravity that pulls the talent in is the exact same gravity that traps it there.
It leaves us with a profound question about the future of elite squad building.
It forces us to wonder, in the modern era of hyperinflated wages and amortized transfer fees, is it actually possible to build a lasting dynasty without occasionally treating your legends like liabilities? There is much more to explore in this material, and we leave it to you to consider which approach truly sustains greatness. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Debate.